Hey, it's Chris. Best of April. The highs, the lows, the interesting stuff, the stuff that caught my eye, the stuff that we have to talk about because of just the ramifications that come from some of these games, projects, thoughts, everything in between, right? Right? I don't have any spicy takes this month. I do, as always. That's why you tune in. Because I'm interesting. I'm not very eloquent. And I'm not very smart sometimes. But I have fun nonetheless. Let's go! So, you know what? Let's start with the crowdfunding campaigns. We'll get into the things I played second half. But let's go to crowdfunding. Let's go heavier there. Right? And the thing I have to talk about with this is Kickstarter. We'll go first because all of these projects now, if in case you missed the update of Kickstarter, you can late pledge on Kickstarter right now. You can literally go over to these project pages and click back this project still, even though it says at the top, this campaign successfully funded on X date, and you can do whatever. Earth, just shy of $1 million, $992,000, 13,500 backers. That's insane. People love them some Earth. I put out a video on it. It's grown on me. Dad joke. Wearing the dad shirt from Bluey too tonight. So I guess that works. I guess we're just going to do dad puns all video. So it gives more of Earth, right? The new mechanism, the new keyword doesn't change things. And again, I'd argue that that's what all good expansions do. They give you just slightly more of the stuff you love without overcomplicating it, overthinking it, or, God forbid, increasing the length of time you're playing it in the first place. I'd make the argument that some things like Arc Nova could use something to streamline it a little bit. And the interesting thing with this one is just the trend that I've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, right? Like, every year, people get one of these games that's all of a sudden new number one, right? Right? We saw it with Dwellings of Eldervale. Then we saw it with Arc Nova. Then we saw it with Earth. And I don't really know what to make of that. I don't, right? The hotness, I mean, that is literally the hotness personified. Literally. Maybe not literally, sorry. Duh. Metaphorically. That is metaphorically exemplifying the hotness, right? And I don't know what to make of that. I don't think I have enough plays of this game to tell you where it falls, because part of me loves it and part of me isn't as in love with it overall. But it also, as an original backer of the crowdfunding campaign the first time around, hasn't gone anywhere. I haven't tried to trade it. You know, there's plenty of good games I've tried to trade. I say tried because, you know, selling and trading things on the freaking market nowadays is difficult as hell, you know? Trying to get a copy of Slay the Spire before Shut Up and Sit Down even put out their review, right? Sky Team, nay. Maybe White Castle right now. Still can't even get Evenfall, even though it's supposed to come out sometime soon-ish. Q2, who knows? Maybe. We'll talk about that in the Don't Buy Anything retail this month. But just a fascinating case study of this is an example of great funds with just an expansion on crowdfunding, right? And I'd make the argument, if nothing else, and you ignore every other thing I've said about Earth so far, that, you know what? Did you see any miniatures? You see any metal coins? Right? This is a card-driven tableau system, folks. Card-driven tableau system. You don't need to bling the freaking Seth Rollins heck out of a game in order to actually get people to be interested in. Right? How much of it is aesthetically based because people in the nature theme is, you know, the 2021's equivalent of zombies? I don't know. But if it wasn't any good, if it was just all aesthetic hype, you wouldn't have raised almost $1 million with an expansion. Now, some of that was deluxifications, some of the, you know, premium components, but whatever. Not as much as other things we've seen. And not still approaching the price point of miniature-driven campaigns. Speaking of miniature-driven campaigns, good segue, Liege, good segue. It's kind of weird talking about myself in third person. You know, it's not even just Chris, it's Liege, and that's creepy. Anyway, we got 2 case studies this month. God of War. What happened with God of War? I'm not really sure. Is this, as I talked about when it launched, is this CMON saturation? Right? CMON is cranking them out like one every 4 weeks right now, it seems like, between the pre-orders and the crowdfunding campaigns and whatever the GameFound situation is. I've yet to see whatever the heck that deal is in terms of incentivized. Again, like, I would love to know what the incentive was for a big company like CMON to go over, because again, like I said previously, Serious Pulp is over, signed their Kickstarter exclusive announcement. So what does that actually mean? Like, if you're somebody like Inside Up Games, let's just go right back to Earth, right? Where they just raised $1 million and just killed it for one of the best games, well received, we'll say, over the last year and a half. If you're a company like that and you're seeing these other companies signing exclusive deals, wouldn't you be a little curious? Wouldn't you be a little bit like, hey, look what I just brought to the table, right? Because it's not like Inside Up Games' other ones recently, like Terminus, have been shabby by any means, right? A couple 100,000 here, a couple 100,000 there. So it just, kind of wonder. And there's no transparency on the board, but the big people get advantages. I mean, it's just like our capitalistic society, right? The rich don't have to abide by the same laws and rules that the rest of us do. Either way, God of War. It's not The Witcher, but it hasn't sold 100 million copies of the video game, but it's sitting somewhere between 20 and 30 million copies. So why does this game only get $832,000? Again, only $832,000. And if you're just a pure money person, right, you're going, well, Chris, clearly God of War did better. But let's take a look at this for a second, Less than half of the mama backers on the GameFound campaign with CMON. The average pledge cost was $100 and nearly $90 for God of War versus about $73 for Earth. So say what you will, even if you buy the base game and the expansion, you're spending, essentially less than 50% of the other cost. And that's not including people who are probably going to add more during the pledge manager. And let's not kid ourselves. A lot of people, if you're like me and you take my advice, that's where you spend a good portion of things. Was this because of IP? Really? Like, this is a huge IP, as I just mentioned. And it was originally marketed as this 1 to 2 player. And they, again, put out a bunch of expansions. And they said, eventually they put out an expansion that increases the player count from 3 to 4. So that was the weird thing that I said, okay, well, where's the disconnect here? 4 expansions that were going to be on the crowdfunding campaign as well. Nightmares, Ghosts of the Past, Nightmares Pantheon, Nightmares Sister of Fate, Nightmares Valkyries, and special bonus cards, whatever the heck that is, right? But I mean, those add-ons alone were $175. So that's not insignificant whatsoever when the base pledge is somewhere between either 70, 90 or 240 for all of that combined. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And again, I'd argue it underachieved. You can, tell me I'm wrong in the comment section. But if you said a God of War video game, 2-3 years ago is only going to get $800,000 after seeing some of its contemporaries like Monster Hunter or Witcher do a lot more Godzooks wise, I don't know. And maybe that just says that the overlapping Venn diagram crowd of God of War compared to Witcher doesn't like tabletop or isn't as interested in tabletop. How much of that do you want to subscribe or prescribe to the GameFound versus Kickstarter browsing effect? I have no idea, right? I'm told, repeatedly in the comment section that that's not a real thing. I mean, it is. A lot of smaller publishers will say that. To what extent, again, if you want to say 10%, 50%, whatever, that's where I have no clue on. But I just wonder, casually speaking, would that have been significantly different elsewhere? And again, it's purely hypothetical, so you can't give me an answer definitively yes or no. So it'll just be interesting to see what future campaigns are on GameFound with CMON and, what we see comparatively. I have no idea. And interestingly enough, I'd love to see numbers on their pre-order side of things too. With the previous Dead Keep, I'm sure, at this point, they'll probably have another pre-order between now and the end of the year. Again, I would just love to see transparency on those pre-orders because I feel like that's useful information for people. I don't see, I guess, from a consumer side of things, why you have to hide that information. I don't know. I mean, again, I guess you can make the argument counterwise that regular online retailers don't show you how many copies of, pre-orders they've done either. But those are regular online retailers. Those aren't dedicated crowdfunding websites. So that's where the disconnect is for me. Again, apples to oranges, I won't deny it. Apples to bananas to kiwis, whatever you want to say. But it just makes me go, why not show that data? Or, you know what, as a consumer, as someone on this side of the camera even, I would like to know those numbers. Will they influence me? Probably not a whole lot. But anytime you're hiding stuff like that, it just always makes me go, why? Right? Like, I don't think there's a big reason behind it. Is it, or is it just more of the no FUD zone, right? The no NFT, you can't have fear, uncertainty, or doubt, even in the realm of things like we're seeing with crowdfunding pages on a weekly basis anymore, right? The fear is you can't have anything other than paid previews because it could cause disconcerting thoughts in backers' minds. But at the same time, again, I don't subscribe to that theory. And so I always give kudos to companies that put reviews or impressions, straight up non-paid stuff on their page. Because the main thing that I look at nowadays with a game, right? The main thing, probably second only to watching a little bit of gameplay / getting a sense of the flow, is I look for things that people say you may not like about this game or reasons why people don't like this game. That is the biggest turn on for me, right? You know what I'm talking about. You go to the Board Game Geek comment section and you say, click on the comments, and you look at the people who rated it poorly. I just saw a game online today. It's not even out. It's like 3-4 months even away from like a crowdfunding project. And someone's like, I have a 5 in here. This is a placeholder for a game I love. Actually, you know what? I take it back. That was actually the Oath Foundations expansion I was looking at, right? Hasn't even launched. Guy says he loves the game. He placeholder rates it a 5. Anyway, sorry if you're in the comment section below, but I mean, that's a little ridiculous. But that's kind of where things go. Like, I look at that and I go, oh, you don't like it because of X, Y, and Z? Oh, X, Y, and Z aren't an issue for me. I'm going to back this even more so. That matters more to me than someone saying how positively positive it is, right? Because the positive comments are a dime a dozen, and the positive comments don't help me filter out what is necessarily going to be a make it or break it for me, right? Because everything, every single game you see on crowdfunding or retail is, positive galore. So how do you filter that out in the media messages that are being sent to you? The honest answer is, I don't know about you, but I can't. It's starting to become white noise. So I look for the stuff that is more beneficial, right? That's why, 6-8 months ago, I almost toyed with the whole premise of doing a review just purely as a negative. To say, don't buy this game if you don't want this, 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 and this. Or don't buy this game if you like this, 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 and this. Again, not to neg on games, but to make it clear who this game is right for, just from that aspect of things. Because that is the one thing that is significantly lacking in our hobby, I'll say, right? Again, just being very critical of things. Myself included, right? I'm not very good at that, and I'm trying to be better. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a, you know what? My mother was an English teacher. I handed her my papers in school so she would take them, critique them, make them better, so I would get a better grade when I edited them up, right? Not like, her doing it for me. That's not what I'm saying. But like, okay, this wording doesn't make sense. Change this. Okay, this needs some, this is a run-on sentence. You need to change this around. Things like that. And so that's what I feel like could be offered more in our hobby. And again, I think that's not unreasonable. I don't think it is. So anyway, how do we get on this bunny trail from God of War? Let's go on to the other massive crowdfunding one with miniatures again. And I sort of felt good about this one. Sort of like the upcoming, prior to me filming this, the upcoming Degenesis Wars from Simon. I looked at that and I said, oh, good gracious, good. I'm so glad it's skirmish-ish, right? Because I am not really tempted by it as much, right? Like the FOMO just kind of hopefully goes out the window between now and when I actually see the campaign page. which is a relief, because if you're anything like me, you look at these big things and you go, oh, am I going to like that? Is that going to be one that fills the hole in my heart? And that was, for me, and you heard me say it, as one of my most anticipated crowdfunding games of the year was Horror on the Orient Express from Chaosium. Chaosium? Whatever. You know how badly I mispronounce stuff all the time. And I just looked at it and I read through the rulebook and I was like, holy cow, there's so much, and I hate this word, so I'm trying to come up with an alternative. There was just so much little stuff to keep track of. I'm not going to say the F word. The one that rhymes with inicky. So I just looked at it. I read the rule book. I looked at the upkeep and I said, this is not for me whatsoever. And it was just so much going on. It was like Nemesis on steroids for me, in terms of just keeping track of stuff and the mechanistic after mechanistic after mechanistic combination of things. And this could ultimately be a fantastic game, but that's my biggest problem with the Nemesi sitting behind right there, is that I can't remember all that stuff. I can't keep track of all that stuff. It's too upkeep for casual gameplay for a lot of the people I play with, because we only play, infrequently. Or play something like that infrequently. So this just, more so, awesome. And I think it hit a lot of chords with a lot of good people. Because again, 13,200 people backed this for $1.65 million freaking dollars. And I am so glad that they are going to get a game they want. You know what? It's going to be on my radar. Won't lie to you. Just like Slay the Spire. I said, this could have a great ceiling, but I feel like the basement could be a lot lower than I'd like to. Or, again, with Slay the Spire, it was more like, okay, am I going to want to play this over the video game? And you know what? Jury's still out on that one. But that's my feeling of this, is that, some of these games, as I said with Youthia, even my review earlier this month of Youthia, at what point with, 700 cards, 400 chits, 40 layers of cardboard tokens you're punching, at what point does some of the upkeep of that be better off with an app? Ooh, them's fighting words, right? Them's absolute fighting words. I'm going to piss some people off with that comment, right? Chris, I hate apps. Chris, you can't use apps. Chris, that's not why I play board games in the first place. Not why I play board games in the first place either. But we're getting these bigger boxes that are literally just like 37 different types of tokens that an app could manage that much easier. I'm not saying it all has to be app driven, but so much of this is just that. I mean, I think that's why some people love Return to Dark Tower in the first place, right? Holy crap, this analysis and ranting is going on for longer than I expected. But that's where it reminds me of. That's why some people like it. It takes some of that upkeep in the cooperative sense out of your hands. You don't have to do it. It does it for you. It's a freaking tower that lights up. Who doesn't love that? It's a game that your friends should own, not you. Anyway, but that's what this reminded me of. I think the concept is fantastic. It's just the execution of it, I just have no freaking clue on. And again, for about $125 a pledge, that's not bad for a miniature driven crawl game nowadays, right? That's not bad, Chris. It's not a ton, but it's still probably more than what you may want otherwise if you're going to actually get stuff played. How many of those $100 to $200 that fall in this range, this time frame, this complexity, how many of those can you play? How many of the Nemesis games do you have? How many of the Zombicide games do you have? How many of the Cthulhu games do you have? How many of any of those havens do you have that are all following Madara's Isofarian Guards, Liege of Dungeoneers, Dungeon Universalises, right? I'm barely scratching the surface of this iceberg, right? So that is the other point that this has to be said with. Because the truth of it is, you just can't have that many. You can't. You can't. You can't. You can. Money's not the issue, though. It's time and space. So then the other campaign that was, really nice for me, Millennium Blades. Millennium Blades. Level 99 games. I wasn't a huge fan of the page setup, though. It was a little convoluted. It was a little bit like, what do I need if I'm, getting this? Or what if I need if I'm, previous backer of X? So it wasn't quite as crystal clear. So you know what? I love them. But I pointed that out, and I'll point out again. At the same time, reasonable price for someone like myself who has way too much of it already. So I don't know. You know, the $18 for getting all the new stuff, 53 cards. It's a fantastic game, but it's like the equivalent card-driven version of Guards of Atlantis 2 for me. I'm probably never going to get rid of it, but I'm probably never going to be able to justify the amount of content that I have for it in the first place. And I guess with this one, do you have a game like that? Just kidding. You have a game like that. You know what a game it is. You can think of it offhand that I have way too much stuff for it. I love it, but I'm also never going to get rid of it, or I'm going to feel guilty about getting any more of it, even though I desperately want more of it at the same time. Right? You know what I'm talking about. You have that game. What is that game for you? Let me know in the comment section down below. Because, like I said, I guarantee you can think of it just off the top of your head the second I say that. And $280,000 is nothing to sneeze at. $280,000 for this type of game, I think it's still fantastic. I think it's still fantastic. Because you had 1,300 people of the 3,200 people getting just that returning pledge level of like $18. So, it's impressive. Is it going to entice people that didn't like it? Heck no. You know, if you were new, this was a great campaign. If you were coming back, maybe not, depending on what you didn't have or what you wanted to. Because again, I don't think you could, unless they changed it, unless I missed it completely. And I'm completely wrong in that, probably. That you couldn't like completely a la mode things if you like had a couple of mini expansions and didn't have them all. So that'd be the only thing I would be concerned about from that side of things. So let's go to other miniature driven Deluxified games, and let's go a complete spin there back over to Game Found in Castles of Burgundy, right? I mean, I guess this just shows the ravenous appetite that, again, is the reason why I can't say that the golden bubble is going to burst anytime soon, is that the impracticality of some of these massively, wonderfully gorgeous, ornate miniatures for a Euro game, the support that it's still receiving, right? Because if that wasn't it wouldn't have raised $2.7 million the second time around. Right? Because say what you will about it, like, I didn't look at this the first time around and go, oh yeah, I'm not sure Awakened Realms is going to do a good job with the miniatures of like, folks, say what you want about some of their games, whether you like them or not, right? Like, the miniatures are probably in the top 2 or 3 comparatively across the board, period. So if you didn't think the production was going to be knocked out of the park with this one, well, I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you. But that's, you know, the thing, right? How much Deluxified can you do? You know, with Earth, it doesn't really get in the way. But, I mean, that's the problem with that. I like the acrylic tiles, but the miniatures for these tiles, I think they just make it harder to play and harder to figure out what's going on sometimes. And so for the miniature side of things for this, it was the only thing I'd probably consider getting rid of. You want a playmat. You want an awesomely Deluxified version in the first place because it's one of your favorite games and it's one of the top 25 ones that you should own all time and play and teach anyone to. No disagreement to me right there, right? Like, I talked about it in my review, I don't know, like 6-8 months ago. But, right? That's a lot of money for that game too. Because comparatively, go pay, you know, $20 in the secondary market for the 10th anniversary edition. So, if anything, the other take-home point with this, just like Bezier's that I was going to say something else there, talked about several times previously, deluxifying games that aren't out of print, that aren't out of stock, that aren't even old. How do you feel about that? Or have had recent reprints already? Because guess what? This just tells people on the publisher side of things that they can get away with it. That they can do it and you will buy it. You will buy a second or third time of this game in the first place. I know, slightly different than Millennium Blades, slightly the same side of things as well. Last up here, my surprise of the month, One Hit Heroes. Co-op boss battling with 1 hit point from Wiggles 3D. Again, you're going to make the argument it underachieved, 3,400 people, nearly $300 Canadian $1,000. At the same time, this was probably one of the funnest games I played all month. And it would easily be on the next segment if I wasn't talking about it now as one of my favorite games of the month. I think they're doing some cool stuff with this. It reminds me of a very early reminiscent Aeon's End, with obviously a different twist completely altogether. You know, the pack drafting thing is fine, but basically it's just drafting and you get more of a selection. And so I wish there was more carryover from episode to episode. That was my big criticism. And they're going to have an epilogue, which is going to have more. And so I just hope they figure out a way to incorporate that. But again, I feel like this is a series that could easily be expounded, compounded, and built upon, just like a Marvel United, when I said what you could do with that, right? Don't be fooled by the simplicity, because simplicity breeds ingenuity, right? And I was just watching a Chinese drama tonight. I don't know, Chinese drama. Chris is really going on rabbit trails tonight. But there were two guys fighting. And one guy is like pulling out all these different moves, and the other guy is like just fending him off and, you know, he's like, you're a good fighter too. You're on my par. And there is complexity in the simplicity of which you are blocking me, because the simplicity of which you're doing it is actually really complex. If that makes sense, right? And so that just is what I look at with games like this. And I go, don't overlook them, because also there are just certain games that you play. And again, not for everybody, and everybody has different ones. But you just go, it has an it factor for me. It has the it factor. It may not be the most mechanically sound. It may not be the biggest oof or the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But it makes you just have that sheer enjoyment of why you got in the hobby in the first place. Right? And that was One Hit Heroes for me. Speaking of that, let's just segue right into the top games of the month. So, top games of the month for me, I mean, apart from One Hit Heroes, Star Wars Unlimited. I tried to hit 100. Didn't get anywhere close. Got about 50 games in April. And the only thing I'll say is I'm cooled off a little bit. Mostly because it's only so fun playing it online and playing against one person. And I can't get to local stuff. My weekends are filled with kids' activities and work. And so eventually, if I could do that and have 2 or 3 decks to rotate through and get some of that, or tournament scene style, competitive scene style with just something, I think I would be re-energized with that on a weekly basis or daily basis or monthly basis. You know, not that I need to play it that often, but yeah, right? And truth be told, I am sitting on right now a couple boxes that I picked up before they went out of stock everywhere. That this is the debate, right? Like, there's people having this debate online all the time. These boxes are selling for anywhere between $210 and like $250 a box, when the MSRP is like $119, and people were buying them for $90 when they were originally coming out, or $95. So do you flip that, or do you just pull it? And I have no idea, like, because I'm sort of right in between. I want more. I don't necessarily need more. So do I just wait for the next round of things with the expansion number 1, box set number 2 coming in July? I'm tempted just to wait. And you know what? I just fear I have one of those showcase cards sitting in one of my boxes, right? I don't have a clue. Either way, I'm happy. And I just hope that I will stay that happy. And that's going to be my big conundrum as a whole. Like I said, we talked about Earth already. I'm not going to go into that again. And then on the Underground, my review for that went live earlier this month for Paris, New York. That's a highly underrated game, folks. If you like anything of a step-up Ticket to Ride with actual routes that matter, that's my recommendation. Now, would I play it at 3 and 4 all the time? No, I just kind of like it at 2 when you're controlling 4 colors. But I'd make the argument that maybe 3, even though there's some king-making potential with the lines of just being like a lazy passenger and making them take whichever one is like closest, is an intriguing premise, and I really kind of like it. The only problem now is I have 2 copies. I have both the original and the newer Paris, New York one. And so I'm probably going to get rid of my original, just because I think Paris, New York is fine. It's a slight upgrade, and there's a slight nuance in terms of the scoring. So I'm very happy with that. The disappointment for me was a crowdfunding game called Arcana Prophetia, a game about fate with tarot cards and 1-to-9s, and, you know, flipping and unflipping and creating this grid-based system of, you know, maneuvering. And I really wanted to like this. And it wasn't like a super expensive game. The aesthetic was super cool. I thought it was going to be a big hit, and it's just fallen completely flat with me. Asymmetric tarot-inspired prophecy game of head-to-head 2 players, because you have like 3 different aspects and fate cards, because, you know, if the good player predicts what number the bad player plays, then the good effect on the card plays, but then the bad effect always plays. But then if you miss, then you're trying to manipulate these around on the field because you turn them one way or the other, and whoever has the most up at the end wins. It sounds really good from a bluffing tactical strategy side of things, but the execution of it just left me feeling kind of let down. I don't know if I wouldn't call it a bad game. It just didn't strike a chord with me whatsoever. And so as a crowdfunding game that I backed, you know, I guess I'm a little just disappointed in myself for not to be able to pick out stuff that's as good as fit as I hope it is from that aspect of things. The other one that we, you know, talked about previously, Cores of Discovery. the mind management creators from Off the Page Games. They're cooperative, tile-based sort of deduction resource management. It's kind of what I imagine as Robinson Crusoe, as more of a cooperative game with some flipping. There's not as much mitigation if you're looking more for the pure deduction side of things, but there's a little bit of both. So I enjoyed it. I'm not sure how I'll feel about it long term, because again, it's that mix of very heavy strategy with very heavy tactically based system as well. And I'm not good at strategy. So that's where my dilemma is more than anything else. Then, Steam Power, surprise hit for me. Surprise, but the one map that I had as the prototype copy really kind of made it kind of questionable of what it's going to look like, because the map didn't really utilize some of the strengths of the asymmetric terrains that you were having to go over. So that was kind of hard to gauge how it was going to really give the end product from that aspect of things. And then still, I'll say this, and I talked about this even a month or two ago, it's one of the upcoming releases, or one of the releases just recently from Pandasaurus, depending on when this actually airs, of Courtisans, sort of a Oriflamme meets Love Letter meets Coup style of things. My kid still loves that. My 8-year-old's in love with that game. And so we've played that a bunch too. And so that's a winner for me as a whole. So we got a little Battle Line Medieval as well out with one of my friends locally. I'm really a big fan of that game. It's just highly underrated, just nice to play. So, yeah, there you go. That was April. April in a nutshell. A lot of crowdfunding talk there. Wasn't expecting to go on that many tangents or rabbit trails or anything else. But I guess that's also why you tune in, because hopefully I talk about it in a slightly interesting, but also slightly different way than what other people do at the same time, which is just me. Screwy and a little bit imaginatively fun, we'll say. Right? All in one. That's all I got. How was your May? How's your April? Right? May's almost done. Can't believe it's already done with May. Almost. It's crazy. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. See you around.